Oh, fancy seeing you here. Welcome to the first episode of Next Level, a new ongoing series here at Gameservatory that looks at the multidisciplinary nature of designing fun and compelling play spaces. In a mature and scholarly way, of course. I'm your host, Jeremy Ledbetter.
And I'm back, baby! Did you miss me? I know I did.
That's Counterbot. Don't worry, he won't be in the next one.
Oh, wow, okay. Is that really how we're choosing to start the day?
Speaking of, be sure to watch to the end because I'm going to show you a little extended sneak peek at my next big blockbuster essay, The Final Author, which explores the symbiotic relationship between game developer and game player through the lens of Alan Wake and its connected universe. As part of researching for that video, I read Dr. Bettina Bódi's book, Videogames and Agency. Her work backs much of what I want to talk about today and in The Final Author. In her heuristic for analyzing spatial agency, Dr. Bódi outlines 3 different ways of framing game space. We're going to look at the first and the third today. Representation space is what you see on screen, all of the art that composes a setting. In Alan Wake, this is the town of Bright Falls and the surrounding forest. Ludic space is the mechanical underpinnings of that environment, a traversable volume in all of its liberties and limits, where you can and can't run, or climb, or swim, you get the idea. As Dr. Bódi notes, representational and ludic spaces are not strictly separate. For example, in Assassin's Creed, we find ledges covered in bird shit because birds are perching there, representational, but any given shit ledge, sorry, it's just that shit ledge is such a funny phrase, like, probably a good insult, like, fuck off, shit ledge. Anyway, sorry. Any given shit ledge also signifies ludically that it's a safe, surefire way to get to ground. Well, except for this shit ledge, maybe just climb down this one. Now, while this is a glitch, it's also a good example of representational space and ludic space being out of sync, which often makes for rather frustrating gameplay. There are several design pitfalls relating to discordant representational and ludic space, so to help avoid these, let's look at 3 common examples of levels behaving badly.
That was fun for you.
It was fun for me. To begin, parts of representational space can appear to be ludic signifiers when in fact they are not. For example, in Alan Wake, Sheriff Breaker directs us to the roof to overcome this broken fence. Initially, I was drawn to the door with the bright overhead light, but it's locked. Next, I tried in vain to clamber onto the overhang by way of car and wood pallets, and that was also a no-go. Meanwhile, I completely overlooked a ladder off in the periphery. It didn't even cross my mind because we actually see this ladder earlier in-game and it's not interactable. Which makes sense, otherwise you could prematurely wander into irrelevant parts of the level, but adding a prompt there, like a little one-line, "I've got no reason to go up there, I need to go save my wife Alice," would do 2 things. It would let us know that this is in fact interactable, just not now, and possibly plant a suggestion in our minds of where to find roof access later on in the game. A second common misstep is when ludic signifiers may indeed not be significant enough. To avoid this, some developers have just given up trying to be subtle about it, and if you've been on gaming Twitter, first of all, why are you doing that? Stop. But if you have been, you probably saw the yellow paint discourse. You know, a few of the gamers feel some kind of way about obnoxious ludic signifiers. These are usually garish markings like bright, bold paint slathered on anything remotely interactable. And look, I also get annoyed at the Fisher-Price My First Breakable Box energy of it all. Editor Jeremy here. I want to clarify why this annoys me. Part of the pleasure I get from gaming is reading environmental context clues for what might be useful nearby. I get more in character, if you will, engaging this way. So bold ludic signifiers take away some of the fun of discovery for me. That said, I don't think it's childish for you not to enjoy that kind of play, or to simply desire obvious ludic signifiers for your own reasons, including disabilities where bold signifiers make the game accessible to you. A gameplay toggle would be ideal for everybody, but in the scheme of things, I'd much rather games be as accessible as possible than not. Alright, back to the show. But the paint bucket approach does circumvent a more nuanced problem of creating something that is noticeable enough for most people, but naturally fitting within the representative world. For what it's worth, I think either approach is totally fine depending on the developer's intention. Both have their own pros and cons. Alan Wake is a rare instance of a game that has its cake and eats it too. Hidden caches of weapons and ammo can be tracked down by a trail of bright yellow paint, but the trail can only be seen in a direct beam of light. I like this because it's a bit of a puzzle that's different from combat, and it also helps reinforce the narrative that Alan is being watched by unseen forces, both ill and forces for good. Finally, sometimes ludic signifiers can be misleading about how they want to be interacted with. This is a minor example, but in Jedi Survivor, Cal obtains the ability to safely dash through laser shields, or ray shields, or whatever you nerds are calling them these days. Who do I look like to you? Star Wars Explained? From its introduction through subsequent encounters, all of the dashable shields I came across were green. When I arrived at the final level of the game, however, suddenly, all the shields I encountered were red.
Oh no, not red shields. Are you stupid?
Coming from Jedi Fallen Order to Survivor, red shields were a barrier disabled only at a computer terminal. The concept of red shields equaling barrier and green shields equaling dash had been so ingrained up to this point that I ran around this level much longer than I care to admit, just looking for an off switch. Another small example is from this mine puzzle in Alan Wake. The crane reaches this ledge, and my very first impression is of two available paths. I thought, well, maybe the one on the left holds some hidden loot, where the one on the right appears to go deeper into the level, so that's gotta be the main path. Momentarily forgetting that Alan jumps with the conviction of an unsure cat on Quaaludes, I went with my gut, and obviously that was a mistake. The left path is part of the puzzle that I had not reached yet.
Are you sure these examples aren't just attributable to player error?
Oh, no, these are definitely on me. I don't think there's even anything to fix about those last two examples. My point is that all my time playing games collided with the visual language of these levels. My impulse was primed by prior experience. These examples may not have tripped you up, dear viewer, but undoubtedly you have examples of your own. How many times have you lamented, I thought the game wanted me to do this, but it actually wanted me to do that? There's no way to fully eliminate this experience, of course, and there's probably an argument to be made that some frustration amplifies the pleasure of subsequent success. But generally speaking, effective level design intends to limit frustration within beneficial and tolerable bounds.
All of that is so real, and you are true, and I see your big brain. But sometimes discordance between representational and ludic space, it's not such a bad thing. Sometimes it's preferable to deceive the player about what's ludically possible than it is to remove their agency altogether. To my point, at the end of Mass Effect 3, Shepard makes a desperate run to a teleportation beam in the face of devastating enemy fire. This occurs after a long final fight through war-torn London. Pacing-wise, this moment is a payoff for our effort, as well as rising action into the climax of the story. Instead of making this a cutscene, BioWare did something rather interesting here. While the representation space is bleak and full of mortal peril, the ludic space is completely benign. No matter how poorly you dodge the Reaper's incoming fire, Shepard never truly gets hurt. The appearance of a near miss is enough to maintain the illusion of high stakes, but the player is never in any real danger of game over. If they were, repeated failures would undermine the pace of this victorious charge. And in anticipation of the climax, no one wants to be hindered by petty interruptions, especially when you worked so hard for that climax. You worked so hard for the climax.
Despite whatever that was, Counterbot is right. There's so much design potential in bending the relationship between ludic and representational space. For instance, and spoilers for Outer Wilds DLC Echoes of the Eye, skip here somewhere on the screen in order to avoid. By the way, this channel will always have Outer Wilds spoiler warnings because some things are sacred. In Echoes of the Eye, you eventually uncover that in order to hack into the back rooms of an extraterrestrial matrix simulation, you have to strategically leap off of a life raft and no-clip through the floor. Like much of Outer Wilds, this is something that you were always ludically capable of, but until you knew to try, was impossible to discern from the representative environment. However, subverting the relationship between representative and ludic space is an advanced level design technique. Generally, it's important that levels are enriched with opportunity to leverage all actions at our playing disposal. Representative space, at its most ideal, underlines these opportunities while also being careful not to allude to opportunities where there are none. Of course, that is easier said than done, but communicating with spatial design will have to wait for a future episode.
And there it is. This has been Next Level with me, your main host, Counterbot.
No, wait. I was going to talk about the final author.
You mean the video that I'm not in? Okay. Well, y'all just have a great time. I'll be over here excluded and alone.
Okay, have fun. So, friends, I don't know if you noticed, but it's been a few months since my last video. What was meant to be a spooky October release coinciding with Alan Wake 2 has grown into its own thing, and honestly, I'm kind of glad that it did. Getting to play Alan Wake 1, American Nightmare, Control, and finally Alan Wake 2, I was able to better appreciate how Remedy's design approach has evolved and matured over 13 some odd years. What emerged is a video retrospective about the difficulty of game production, the role of player agency and volition within interactive storytelling, and how we continue to find new ways to play with games long after they've received their final update. At this point, the entire video has been shot, voice cameos from other fantastic YouTubers have been recorded, shout out to Pimscript and Hot Cider, and I'm a little less than halfway through post-production, and you might wonder what's taking so damn long. Well, since December, I've been busy modeling virtual sets based on Alan Wake and Control, creating complex animation and particle simulations, in addition to a few tedious, time-consuming techniques that pull me out of my living room turned studio and into the Remedy-verse. The final author is still about a month away, give or take, but should that go on any longer, I promise to put out another video like this to tide you over. I'm trying a new approach to my blockbuster essays, creating them in the background of less intensive work like the video you're watching now. Hopefully expect more regular content on the channel going forward. With all that said, if you want to see more Gameservatory at an even quicker pace, please help me get this channel off the ground. You can subscribe to my brand new Patreon, or leave me a tip on Ko-fi, or, just click some of the various buttons down below so that more people see my work. I'm on all your favorite socials, unless I'm not. Be sure to check the links in the channel description, and until next time, friends, happy gaming. For example, in Assassin's Creed, we find Levages covered in bird shit? I don't think so. Not just by forces for ill, but also for forces of good. Forces for good. Good forces. For good forces. Ludic signifiers can be misleading about how to be interactive with. Okay.